hope you can hear me. Like Peter says, I do have an interesting background. I've been where you're sitting, and I went to these same seminars once a week, as often as I could, and often there would be these people here that would be working, and they'd come back, and I'd always be curious, what are they doing? What am I going to do when I graduate? And it was always in the back of my mind. I really had not a firm idea in my head whether I wanted to go into industry or education. And so I'd come to these and I would listen. So, I've been there. So like Peter said, I graduated in '99. While I was here, the program was still called Instructional Science. And then we changed over, I think, while I was here to IP&T. And so I see just a couple of familiar faces in the room. Most of you, I'm glad to see I don't see any of my peers, because that means they've graduated. Some of us stayed a long time. I know I was here for 6 years. And I actually, when I came into the program, I came in as a master's student. And my mentor then was Adrian Van Monfrance. And I worked with him in many evaluations. One of them was the Centennial Schools here in Utah. We'd go from around the state looking at the various, what the schools were doing with this Utah state program. And once he asked me, he said, why are you getting a master's? And we started talking about it. He says, why don't you go for a PhD? And I never considered it before, but I'm glad he did, because for me it was a good choice. And it kind of just rolled me right into what I'm doing now, and that is working as a course mentor at Western Governors University. So, just a little bit of background about Western Governors. I don't know, many of you may be near the end of your time here at BYU and you're looking to graduate. I had really no firm idea of what I was going to do, and I was really, really, really worried about it. And it just so happened that I remember once I was looking at my emails, and one of my BYU professors was kind of sending out emails about jobs related to the field, and she sent me this thing about Western Governors University. I'd never heard of it before, and it intrigued me, so I applied right away. And then right after that, we took this. I think it's the first time. Lori Nelson. We took this cross-country trip back to Virginia, which is where I'm from. We had no kids. We had a dog. We didn't take the dog. But we drove cross-country and back to Virginia. When I was in Virginia, I got this phone call. It was from Western Governors. And they said, we'd like to interview you. I said, I'm in Virginia right now. So if I were in Utah, it'd be kind of easy. I could just drive there, 9 hours drive. And they said, well, we'd really like to interview you. So we arranged. I said, well, I'm coming back through Denver. We can stop by and go, because then the Western Governors academic offices were in Denver. And so I got a call about 2 hours later, and they said, Vince, we'd like to hire you. I said, I thought you wanted to interview me. He said, we'd just like to hire you. And I didn't know what to say. I said, wow, this is how it happens. So let me give you some background as to how it happened. When I was here, I was the IP&T 515R and 286 instructor, and as a graduate student.
The 515R has changed actually since that day. So why don't you explain what that was?
That was, well, it was kind of the equivalent what the 286 is, but the 515R was a project, a development project of sorts that was related to technology. And so one of my students then was a guy named Bob Mendenhall. And Bob had already been in the field for a long time working. He was an older student, right? He wasn't a young, typical, traditional master's or PhD student. And so he'd been in the field for a while. He'd been very successful, but he needed a PhD. So he came and he got a PhD from BYU here in our department. And he was in my 515R class. And so what had happened, he had gone on, before his PhD was even finished, he was hired as president of Western Governors University, which was brand new. And when, we got to remember, we were very small back then. And so when they were all sitting around saying, what are we going to do? Who are we going to hire as our faculty? And and my name came up, and Bob said, "Oh yeah, he was my professor. Hire him." So that's how I had an in with President Mendenhall, because he was one of my students. So you never know what's going to happen.
Be kind to your students.
Kind to your student. I was kind to
They
Bob.
could be your bosses.
Yeah, he could be my boss. He's a great boss. So that's how it happened. And then I show up at the Denver office on the way back, and I get this suit, because of course I didn't have a suit on the way out. But and they all look at me like, "Why are you wearing this suit?" And really, I'm overdressed for Western Governors, so it's very casual. We work at home. All of our faculty work at home. And so, anyway, that's probably enough of a little history about me, but I wanted to just give you some background information about how it kind of got started. You just never know how those things are going to roll out. So I just took down some talking points that I wanted to share with you. I know that you wanted to know a little bit about competency-based education, maybe a little bit about Western Governors. It's, you know, I come from the same background that you do, most likely, traditional education. I think online learning is very difficult, and I think I would have a hard time with it. Personally, I've never taken but 1 or 2 online courses. So this thing about an online university was very new back in 1999 when I started. Our first degree-seeking program was called the Master of Arts in Learning and Technology. And guess what? It was almost a perfect match to what I had learned here at BYU. I mean, it was like that. We had the same types of domains of learning. We had instructional design, we had research, we had measurement evaluation, and we had technology integration, and then back then a couple of others that were since subsumed. And so this was the first degree-seeking program. Before I came, there were like just various classes that were offered. It was more of an idea. Western Governors was founded primarily by then Governor Leavitt of the state of Utah and Governor Romer from Colorado as a way to tap into the resource of people who had gone in, gotten some of their degree, couldn't finish, and for whatever reason were just working adults. And they couldn't leave their homes, and they said, you know, we got to serve this population. So those 2 plus 17 other Western Governors with the Western Governors Association helped to form Western Governors University. And I had the first 50 students that were degree-seeking students at Western Governors University. They were all scholarship students from the state of Utah. They were all teachers. So the State Office of Education helped to, aligning with certain industries here in the state of Utah, businesses, helped to fund these scholarships to get us off the ground. Because back then we didn't have anything off the ground. We just had a few people taking classes. And that was really where it started. So I came in with the first 50 students. I had those students from beginning to end. In other words, they were assigned to me to work with them. And I worked with them throughout all of their coursework, from when they matriculated to when they graduated. So it's quite an interesting experience in that way.
Question.
Yeah.
So at that time, did Western Governors offer classes, or were they taking classes at their local community colleges and you were kind of helping them navigate what they needed to do to be able to pass the assessments?
Yes and no. When we first started offering these classes, they were actually offered by professors at various universities. So we were using distributed resources there in that way. So we had a professor from NAU, we had a professor from up in the Western Washington University. They were all primarily smaller type universities, and these were work that these professors were doing on the side, you know. And so the model has since changed a little bit to make it more scalable. Right now our coursework is built out so that you can go through it all on your own. And then that's what I do as a course mentor, is I kind of monitor the course, make sure that no one has questions, things like that. So let me see if I've covered everything for here. In the background. Oh, just a few milestones for Western Governors. We had our first graduate in 2000, so I started in '99. We had our first graduate a little over a year later. I started in September. She graduated in December. This was her master's degree. She was an exemplary student. And I remember her oral defense. She was a school teacher from Roy. And her oral defense, the whole Learning and Technology Council, which, by the way, one of our, you probably know Vic Bunderson. You may know, I know Dave. Sort of
He
Vic
came last week.
Did he really?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, he was on that council with me and a few other people. Actually, there were like 12 of us in the room with this poor student that she was defending. And, you know, and she did it with style. And I remember after she left, she made a presentation, she left the room, and they looked at me and they said, are all of our students going to be like this? And I said, no. I don't think so. Because she was exceptional. So that was kind of, you know, this student, I remember, I think I had 5 people in the room with me when I defended. And she had the whole council plus a few other people. I think maybe President Mendenhall was in there too. So, and then in the spring of 2001, we announced our Teachers College. We had a $10 million grant from the Department of Education to get that started. And in 2003, we received accreditation. So you got to keep in mind, before 2003, we had all these students coming through. We were not an accredited school. And you know, this is very well something that could happen to any one of you here in this room. You could be when you get out of here, you could be starting with a university that's just from the ground up. So it's been really interesting to see. So these students that started with us were really pioneers because they had faith in us that we were going to be accredited, but at that point, their degree was not accredited. It was recognized in the state of Utah and the state of Washington because we had a cohort there. But these were brave souls, I think, to get started. And what was interesting about our accreditation, I know that some of you have probably been involved with accreditation visits. Northwestern is our accrediting body here in this area. Well, because our area covered so much area, most of the western United States, we decided it would be a great idea if we could be accredited by a unique interregional accrediting committee that consisted of 4 different accrediting bodies. And logistically, it was a nightmare. But they pulled it off, but they all agreed they would never do anything like that again. So, so it was one of a kind. It was unique to us. I don't think it had ever been done, or will it ever be done again. But I just remember it was crazy. It was chaotic, but it happened. And so 4 years later, we had received that. And then 2006, our Teachers College received NCATE accreditation. Have you heard of NCATE? That's in education. That's a good thing if you're NCATE accredited with the Teachers College. So today our enrollments are around 40,000 plus. The last time I checked, 40,000 plus. We had about 17,000 graduates the last time I checked. But it's kind of been an interesting ride to see that. So what is competency-based education? Does anyone have an idea?
Okay, so you have 40,000 teacher education.
No, well, I'm sorry. Not just teacher education.
Okay.
Yeah. We do have a huge teachers college,
Okay.
but it's not 40,000.
Yeah,
I don't know the numbers, actually. But we've split.
That's all of WG.
That's all of WG.
Okay.
We've split with teacher education, a business college, IT, and nursing. Those are our core areas. And so the model that we have is very market-driven. So they try to pick degrees that are very market-centric and things that that are not a little bit that are not esoteric. I guess I would say, but just that's in demand. And so that's where we got in these 4 areas, and we've stuck with that throughout the years.
So, I'm just curious. So you have the IT, you don't have engineering.
No.
Engineering's in a lot of demand here. So is there a reason why?
I don't know. I don't know if I've never heard engineering thrown about, but if it's a market, I know that's a big area. That could be a future area. When we first started, it was Teachers College. Then we added business. Then we added IT. Then we added nursing. So it's a progression. I'll mention engineering.
I was just wondering if maybe there was something about teaching engineering that kind of precluded it from your list of...
Well, I wonder, I mean, since it's competency-based education, I wonder if they expect a certain level of competency in the students already. In engineering, it's like, you usually can't work in industry for a while without a degree, whereas like a teacher, you can work, you can have a bachelor's degree but not have a master's degree, and so they're trying to, and maybe the same thing with IT, like you have the experience, but you're trying to actually get the degree.
Right. I think so. So who in here has an idea about what teacher or competency-based education is? You want to share it with me?
So I guess the idea, or the way I've heard it's kind of, they assess you based on what you know, and they're trying to, so someone who has a lot of business experience can go in and take classes at their own pace, and basically, once they're assessed as having competency in a given area, then they're checked off. So
that's correct. So it's based on learning and not necessarily a credit unit. Did I say that right? Credit unit of credit. We don't use credits. We do have to have something similar to that, just so that the financial aid people can understand what we're doing. And we call them competency units. So they're roughly equivalent to credit hours.
So do students even need to take courses, or can they just take exams?
Good question. They're all enrolled in the courses, and they're able to take, for whatever reason, let's say you come in and you're a measurement expert, and you come into the measurement evaluation domain, and you just say, give me the course. If you know it, you can just take the course. So in other words, you still have to take all the assessments. How much learning material, instructional materials you go through, that depends on you. And to be honest, most of our students go through everything. They don't come in masters of anything. They kind of know a lot of little things, a little of a lot of different things. But yeah, I mean, if you come in, you'll spend a lot less time than you would otherwise. There was a question in the back?
Oh, I was going to ask, what are the competency tests like?
Good question. We have performance assessments, which are like written projects. Those are the majority of assessments that are done. And then we also, in some areas, we have objective tests as well, which are proctored. And get this, I never would have imagined this when I first started. What we did with our objective test, for each domain we had an objective test. Multiple choice, matching, multiple selection, that kind of a thing. They were administered at proctored test sites throughout the country. We had to have an agreement with each of these test sites. So if a student lived in the rural areas of Wyoming, we had to find a test site for them. Sometimes students had to travel 2 hours, speaking of Wyoming, and I remember one student I had that did that. So that was kind of a pain for a lot of our students. And I remember in the early days, I had a student down in southern central Utah, and for some reason, I went down and I proctored his test. And that was wild, because I've never done that but once. But we did things like that. When you're young and starting out, you do what you have to do. But that wasn't scalable, to have test sites, and you had to build these new relationships and agreements with test sites throughout the country. And so for the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years, they have had online proctoring, where the technology is there that you can actually take a test at your home using online proctoring software. And they have these protocols that they follow to prevent cheating. And the biggest complaint is that the test gets shut down if there's anything that looks weird that's going on in the room. So in other words, they have these protocols they have to do to show the room. They have to be quiet. They can't mouth out loud what they're reading. And a lot of people like to read out loud what they're reading on a test. And when you do that, one of our tests, when it's online proctored, not in a proctored test site, if you go there, that's probably okay. As long as you're not bothering anyone else. But if they do that, it shuts down the test for the student. If there's anything that looks weird at all, the test is just shut down. And then they investigate it, or they talk. I've never taken it. But
so there's not a human proctor?
There is. There's someone that's watching it.
So there's someone at a distance?
We have someone watching it at Western Governors.
So are they like in a room with a bunch of screens?
I haven't seen it. I haven't
seen
seen it, but I imagine it's got like a big screen with multiple windows, and you arrange a time. So you have to schedule a time so someone can actually be watching it. You can't just willy-nilly pick it at any time. So there's certain hours of the day but they're pretty liberal. I mean, up to like maybe 11 o'clock at night. So, but I would have never envisioned that when I first started, that we could actually have online proctoring. It was a big deal to me. I thought that was amazing. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about how we define competency, which was kind of interesting for me because I was able to take part of that when we first got started. We had what was then called a Learning and Technology Council, and I mentioned that Vic Bunderson was on that council. And along with various people that were at various universities. And I got to be part of that council, probably not because of my expertise, but because I was the faculty member, and I was responsible. I was the mentor, And so I was with the students and I understood what they needed, and I had a little background there. So it was a privilege and an honor for me to work in that capacity. And then it was eventually called the Teachers College Council, and then after that I left and had other responsibilities. But so what we did was we convened industry and educational specialist leaders in the field, and these were like big name companies and educational people, and they would gather together and determine what are the competencies that we want our employees to have. And that's how it really got started, and it's really a rough sketch. But that's how, what is it that our people need to know to do their jobs? So that's how it was defined, and then the courses were built, the assessments were developed, and so forth. So that's a little bit about what we did with the councils. And I think the best thing I just wanted to mention about the competency-based education is without places like Western Governors who allow working adults to get their degrees, they would otherwise not ever get a degree. Because they could actually, like when I was a student here, you know, I lived here, I lived on campus, but I didn't have children. I know that many of you probably already have children. I can't even imagine school with children, so that's a limitation that I would have had. But these are people that wouldn't otherwise go to school at all because they can't leave their homes. They live in a rural area. They can't go actually back to a traditional school, even at night, to be able to take classes. It would be difficult for them. And so the average age of our students is probably, I think the last time I remember hearing it was like 43. I think that's since gone down. But the typical college-age student, 18 to 25-year-olds, I don't think we have a lot of those. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's not typical. I think definitely there's the place for being on campus, and I love those years that I have here. But for most of our students, this is the way that they learn. This is the way they have to do it, and they have to be very disciplined to do it. So it's a way for them to have higher income potential. Some of them have experience in their areas, but they don't have the credentials. So this is the only way that they can get that credential to move up to that next level, or to go to get that job that they wanted. And so that's what it allows them to do. Any questions about competency-based education? I'm going to move along to another area.
So you pay, just like here people pay for credits, you pay for competency units?
Good question. One thing about Western Governors that I do know, I don't remember the exact figure, I think it's around $3,000. For the last 6 years, our tuition has been flat rate. That's an interesting story too, Peter, because when we first started out, here's what we did. This is funny. We offered degrees, and we gave a price tag on a degree. So you pay $6,000, I don't remember the price, $6,000, you can get your degree, which meant you could spend 20 years here if you want, and take as many classes as you need to, and we soon realized that was never going to work because there was no incentive for people to want to graduate, right? And so soon after, we changed that model pretty quickly. That was one of the things that we changed. And so now I think it's about $3,000 a term for master's students. Term is 6 months, which gives a little wiggle room because our non-traditional students, we don't really have term breaks. So if you need to take some time to do something like go on a vacation or you get sick or something like that, that 6-month term allows you to do that. Traditionally, I know terms aren't quite that long.
So if I wanted to take an exam, I say, okay, I think I'm ready to do this. I get into it right away. I look at the required courses. I'm like, I could pass off the first third of those. And I go and I take the exams and I fail them or I don't pass them.
Okay.
So then, how does that work? Can I turn around and I can take them again whenever I want, or is there a time in between when you can take exams?
There's a limit on the number of exams that you can take.
Okay.
The number is 3 objective exams, and after that point it becomes a critical issue as to whether or not you can continue, and the university has to go through special approvals. So if you took a test and you failed it, let's say you took the research test,
Okay.
the research fundamentals objective test, and you failed it, you and I would probably work together. I would be, I'm the course mentor in certain areas. We still have the Master of Arts the Master of Arts in Learning and Technology degree changed eventually into the MED because They felt that that was a more marketable degree, a Master of Arts versus a Master of Education, because most of our students were education people. So yeah, you would be working with the course mentor, helping you to identify what it is you're not getting, which of those competencies or objective areas you weren't understanding, and then maybe defining some specific resources, and then going back in, maybe at least wait 2 weeks and take that test again. Or if it were a performance assessment, I would probably work with you to make sure you understood what the grader said was wrong with your paper. Because a lot of times, see, I'm not the grader. I'm a course mentor, but I'm not the grader. We've unbundled that faculty role. That's one of the hallmarks of Western Governors. I don't grade students' papers. I did for a while serve on capstone committees where I did grade their capstone projects, and I just finished that. So that was kind of a bygone era. I just now had my last one, I think, 2 weeks ago. But traditionally, your projects, your assessments, they're not graded by me as a faculty. We have assessment faculty to do that. So, and they have nothing to do with the students. They just grade the papers. They're master's qualified. If you're a bachelor's, they're PhD qualified if they're master's students taking the assessments.
So I'm wondering about, this unbundling of the jobs or the
faculty role?
Yeah. Faculty roles. Are faculty hired full time, or do they work piecemeal?
Faculty are hired full time.
So
we used to allow half-time faculty, and we don't anymore.
So a full-time faculty that's hired to do assessment, for example, it's got to have a pretty miserable life.
I take that back. Most of the faculty like me are full-time, but assessment, I don't think they are full-time.
Because I was just thinking,
because you're just grading all the time. Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, some of the studies that we've done related to online teaching shown that, faculty are motivated and driven by the relationship with the students as much as students are driven by having a relationship with faculty and peers and stuff. And so if faculty in an online setting are just grading, it's like, it's not very satisfying to them,
I think it would be a very big challenge if that's all that they were doing. So I think you're right. I was just speaking for myself and the people I work with. Assessment is a different area. So yeah, I think they're not full-time. And if they are, hopefully they're doing other things, as well, because that would be monotonous. To piggyback on what you said, what I love about my job, two things. What I love about my job is the commute, which is my home office. And so all the faculty at Western Governors work at home. That's the model. If you are a provost, a dean, anyone in administration, or you're on staff, most likely you're going to be working at one of our interregional offices, and the main one is in Salt Lake City. But the faculty, for the most part, we all live at home. Kind of like, the JetBlue, people that you call when you talk to people, they're all working at home. We have VoIP phones, and the VoIP phones connect to WGU, and so that's how it works. I love that as a convenience. The other thing I love is working with the students. Because if I didn't get to work with the students, if I only worked with the course content, I think that would be a drag after a while. So you get to talk to people, you get to know these students as they come through. Unfortunately, in my case, I only get to work with the students that are struggling. So the people who are the students who come through and they're aces, I never see them because they stream right through the program. But still, I get to work with a lot of fantastic people.
So when you see students struggling with things, how do you then turn that around and tell the instructional designers or those, the people who are giving the instruction and creating the assessments, these people, how do you then manage that relationship to make sure that, hey,
good question.
By the way, people are struggling with this?
With this area, this is a problematic area of our course content.
Yeah.
We have what's called a product development manager. How does that sound? Who's responsible for several different areas of focus. And so we'll go and we'll say, hey, the last guy was Jose. Jose, we have a problem here. We need to change this. So this is confusing to students. We can make this better. And so the faculty will work with product development to do that.
often do you find yourself doing something like that?
You know, it's actually on a continual basis. We try to wrap them out as they come up. Just the other day, I had a problem with something that came up, and it obviously had been in the system for years, and no one had caught it. No student had mentioned it. No one had caught it. The course was quite old, so you know we have a system. We have a ticket system where we fix things like that.
How many students would a course mentor like yourself work with?
Well, that's a hot topic right now because we're moving to a new system where we are going to be assigned specific number of students, but that's coming up in March actually. Up to this point, I've just had all the students who work in the MEDLT field. So all the research students, all the measurement evaluation students, and until like a year or two ago, I had all the technology students as well. So it's kind of stretched pretty thin. And now we've gotten a little bit larger in our faculty. So I don't know that number. Right now, what I'm looking at, what's going to roll out in March is 180 students. At a time, that are going to be taking my courses for which I have stewardship.
Those are the students that are having challenges, or those
are
all of the
everybody.
students?
So a good portion of those students, like I say, will never know, because they'll just go through like they're supposed to and not have any trouble at all. You know, a fraction of those students I'll work with individually. We may have several calls with them.
Vince, I'm curious, because students move at their own pace within the courses, is there any sort of community that forms with the students and learning communities?
Good question.
Kind of on their own?
You know, we've really struggled with communities. And, you know, various people at the university have felt like we need to have these different types of communities. And then people who actually work in the communities find that it really doesn't work as well as we think it should. So in other words, we have a research fundamentals learning community. We have a measurement evaluation learning community. We have a technology integration learning community. We find that they're very seldom used by students. Our students, they want to, we joke about the IT students, because in the IT world, they don't want to have anything to do with anyone. They just want to work on their stuff and get it done, you know? And it varies program to program, we see. Like the nursing students, they're much more hands-on. And the special ed students and the elementary ed students are much more hands-on. They want to socialize and talk. But the business students, the IT students, and to a degree our LT students, our MEDLT students are like that as well. But we have others that are not like that. And so we provide the resources in the community. We provide a way for them to communicate with each other through message boards. We provide the materials there that link to webinars that we've recorded and templates and things that are helpful to them. That's what they go in and they get. And then they get out. And if they have trouble, they email me or call me.
Peter, we're kind of dominating. You guys have some good questions. Ask them. One of the things I was wondering is how much knowledge of the content is required for a mentor, and are students, the challenges that students have with completing more knowledge oriented, or does it tend to be more motivational, more not related to their ability to learn, but you know they've got lots of things going and they're just, you know, they need somebody to encourage them to get going and finish, and they can do it, that kind of thing.
I like these questions because so far the questions you're answering, I know the answers to. I was nervous that I'd get up here and I might not know some of the answers. Probably still will before we're done. What I haven't mentioned so far is that I'm a mentor, but I'm a specific type of mentor called a course mentor at Western Governors. So which means I deal with the course content, but we also have a great group of people who are called student mentors. These student mentors are more in line with calling the students once a week to make sure that they're progressing as they should, and their students are accountable to these student mentors. They really have more intimate one-to-one relationships with the students than the course mentors do. And that's what I used to do before we had the dual model. I kind of wistfully looked at that when we were making that change, because I would no longer have students from beginning to end of their programs. But the student mentors still do. So Yeah, they're there. They're the ones, and you know, to various degrees, they have an expertise in our area. Fortunately, in our program, all of our people have a pretty good background in our area. They at least have a master's degree in our area, the educational technology field. A lot of the programs may not be to that extent, but that's what my role is, and I should be able to answer any of the questions they have, knowledge content-wise, procedural-wise, process-oriented questions related to their projects. So if the student mentors don't know, and there's various degrees of what they don't know, some know more than others, but if they don't know it, they just send them to me or to my colleagues who work in our areas. So that's the model. All right, let me see. I wanted to just share with you to give you a snapshot of what some of the things that I've done since I worked at Western Governors, to give you an idea of what we do, or what you could be doing. Let's see. I served as a program coordinator, which is kind of roughly the equivalent of your program chair. My old mentor, Dr. Merrill. How long ago did Dr. Merrill leave?
He retired, was it 2009?
Yeah, 2009, okay. So roughly equivalent. I was never even close to Dr. Merrill, but Paul Merrill. But that I served as a program coordinator for about 6 years, the first 6 years. I was a training coordinator where we had all the new training people come in. I got to do that. That was interesting. And then I've been a course mentor and in both, like I said, technology, education, measurement, and research. Let's see. I don't want to say all of this. One of the most interesting things that I've been able to do is help to build out the programs. And for that, I remember back in '99 and 2000, we actually came down to BYU and had several of the faculty help us with standard setting on our assessments. Have anyone here heard of how we set up our cut scores in a criterion reference scoring system? Anyone heard of the Enkhoff approach? Enkhoff? It was actually, it's discussed in one of my old textbooks that I used here when I was a graduate student. Crocker and Algina? Dave? Crocker and Algina, ring the bell?
Before my time.
Before your time, okay. Right. So and actually, that's how we got our test scores set. Because at WGU, we don't have A's, B's, C's, and D's, and F's. Okay, we don't have that. We have a cut score the students have to pass. And I believe the equivalent that's rated at that is, for master's students, is a B, maybe a B+, I'm not sure. Let me explain a little bit how that works. So let's say we have an objective assessment. How do I know if a student is competent in that area, right? How do we know if we have a student that's competent in the measurement evaluation area or the research area? They have a 60-item multiple choice test that they have to take. And so the process that is done with that is that, of course, we have item writers that write the items that match to the objectives and the competencies in our area. And then we have people who go through and we review those items to make sure that they map to the competencies. They actually measure what the competencies are asking them to measure. And then there is a committee of people, professionals in the field, who will read each question. And here's the question that they will ask themselves. And here's actually what we did many years ago with some of the faculty here. When after I first left the BYU and I came down here as WGU, we convene people together. Actually, this is done a couple of different ways. But you look at each item. And the question you ask yourself is, what is the possibility or the chance that a minimally qualified person, a person that's acceptably competent, but at the lower end of competence, because that's the key term, a minimally qualified person would come in and be able to answer this question correctly. So in essence, you're saying, out of 100 people, how many minimally qualified people would be able to answer this question correctly? Okay? So it's kind of a subjective judgment. So you're answering the question, you look at it and you say, well, this is a tough question. I think that maybe 50% of the people who are minimally qualified could answer this question. So you're gonna have a range of scores, and at the end, all those are counted and summarized, and I'm not sure what statistics are done on them. But that's the approach that we use to set up our cut scores. So, for example, the cut score on our objective test for research fundamentals is 70%. you have to meet 70% in order to pass that test. If you get a 69.9, you have to retake the test. If you get anything above it, you pass the test and you move on. So that is something that was interesting to me when I first got there. Is how do we set up these tests that are not on, on the percentage scales of A's, B's, and C's and D's, because we don't have those at the university. Okay, I think I've about covered most of the things that I do. Oh,
Vince,
as a faculty member, David.
so do you guys, you kind of do research on what you're doing? Because it seems like you're doing a lot of interesting, innovative things based on stuff you've studied and learned about over the years. But
Yeah.
are you doing inquiry, like action research or evaluation on what you're doing, and then exploring what you would recommend to yourselves and to others based on that?
I'm glad you asked. We have a budget amount, and maybe I'm sure that other faculties do too, about professional development and attending conferences. And publishing is not a requirement of Western Governors. So that's a big difference. It's more of a practitioners-oriented approach. But we do focus on action research. I actually think that we need to do more of it, personally. I would like to see it emphasized more than it is. I know that at a traditional university, that's a big deal. But it's not a big deal at Western Governors. I'd like to see it more heavily focused. They do focus on professional development, but it's not a publish or perish type of environment at all.
What I was thinking is you've got all this data.
We've got lots of data. We've got lots
Maybe
of data.
some of us that do need to perish, we don't publish.
I can connect you. I can at least get a contact person for you. Good question. Good point.
Actually, it's an interesting question in terms of how much research has been done on this model. I mean, Western Governors has now shown that it can be successful. It was a new model, and being both online and competency based at the time.
Yeah.
Has there been any research done on maybe consequential validity of?
I don't know if it's been internal research. There may be external research that's been done on it, but I don't.
Is there anybody at the institution whose job is
Yes.
to do research?
Yes, there is. We have an IR board. It's we're having someone come and speak. We have, much like any faculty would have a weekly faculty meeting, we have actually faculty meetings and sub-faculty meetings, depending on what areas we're serving in. And that's one of the things that's on our agenda in the next month, is to have someone from IR come and tell us what is and what is it not acceptable for us to use as part of our data that we share. And Peter, you mentioned about that successful model. I remembered sitting in a meeting when it was about the size of this table. Everybody at Western Governors sat around this table, and we were talking about how to support ourselves, how to support Western Governors, because we didn't have any money. And it wasn't until it was a few years had passed, maybe 4 or 5 years, before I remember someone saying that tuition is now supporting the university, because before then it was fun. It was funded by grants, scholarships, and now the tuition is covering expenses. It's paying our salaries, which is a good thing.
I think Sabrina had a question.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was interested in how you don't assign letter grades. Are there levels of competency, or it's either you're competent or you're not?
It's either you're competent or you're not.
So what do you consider the role of assigning a grade to be? Because it's not to sort between students.
What do I consider the role of a grade to be? In our university or in a typical university?
Yours.
Well, we don't assign anything to it in terms of grades. Because out of competency-based education, we don't have like highly competent, moderately competent, or minimally competent. Students just have to pass a certain benchmark. I guess maybe in a similar way as if you have to pass, there's a certain score you'd have to pass, like to pass the bar if you were a lawyer, and you meet that cut score, you've passed. Or a medical exam or something like that. So it's very much oriented in that way. It is really different than what I grew up being used to, my own personal experience and what you have here. Yes?
Are all these assessments, how do I say it, like when you're assessing competency, sometimes it helps to actually be with and see someone actually perform some task, as opposed to just answering a question or writing something and answer out. Does that ever happen in any form, or is it mostly just the
That happens in
answering
our
questions?
teachers' college, where we do demonstration teaching. We actually have a network of people that actually have to see those things being done, of course, which is amazing to me that they could do that. But in terms of the projects in my program, no.
Okay.
They don't, it's all worked at home. They write up the projects. They have to do, like for example, set up a research proposal, or they have to set up do an evaluation and then conduct the evaluation and report the data. And they have to do capstone projects where they actually have to collect data in various capacities and analyze the data. But as far in terms of watching them, we don't do that.
Sure.
Okay. We use something called turnitin.com. Has anyone ever heard of Turnitin? Do we use that here? BYU?
Yes, we're learning this week.
Really? So I never knew about that until I started there, and it's a kind of a new thing, I guess. And so everything that students submit, they didn't have it back then here, I'm sure. Yeah, this was something probably I've heard in the last 8 years. Pardon?
Nobody plagiarized that.
Nobody plagiarized that. We didn't do that back then.
Kids today.
So, but everything that's submitted now is submitted through Turnitin.com, and so apparently it works really well for us.
Christina had a question.
Christina?
So for your master's programs, obviously people have passed some sort of bar of achievement to get a bachelor's degree. For the incoming bachelor's programs, do you have any sort of admission requirements for the extra burden of doing it all online, or do people self-select?
For the bachelor's degrees?
For the bachelor's degrees.
I know there's an admissions process, and they have to collect certain information from them as any university would, but I don't know what the admission test looks like.
So is it open enrollment?
It is definitely an open enrollment. If we find that a student is ill prepared by their credentials that we see them have, and they do take some type of test, they will try to counsel them out instead of just receiving them and taking their money, after which they will fail and then go away. So that's the idea.
Do you have a screening tool for people that would be more successul on the online environment?
There is a screening tool that they use. I don't know what it is. I'm not personally involved with that. But that's a good question. They do that, and that is a concern that Western governors have, is that we want to have open enrollment because that's part of our mission statement. But we want to discourage you if we feel that you're not a good candidate for online learning. Let's face it, many people are not good candidates. You have to be driven. You're not going to have anyone in front of you demanding a paper every week. And you might have a student mentor that calls you, but you won't be face to face with anyone. So it's not cut out for everyone. Question in the back?
I was going to comment on the Turnitin.com thing. Russ Osterthorpe was giving a talk at UVU, and he was telling the story of a student who turned something in here at BYU and it got caught.
Yeah.
And they said 80% of this thing that you turned in is plagiarized directly from Wikipedia.
Wikipedia?
From Wikipedia. And the student said, well, did you read down at the bottom of the article? I wrote the article.
That's good. Our students do so many written projects that sometimes their own work gets reflected in the Turnitin.com report. It's supposed to not do that, but occasionally it does, and it's always frustrating for the students when they can't say what they've already said before. Yeah. It has limitations.
Self-plagiarism. All right, well, it's great question, so we're probably going to have to wrap up.
Yeah, we are done.
So, thank you so much for coming.